Welcome to Failure is Progress, presented by Sweat Factory CrossFit. I am Coach Frankie Ortega.
And I am Coach Keith Barber. Join us today as we discuss everything going on inside the CrossFit space and, more importantly, what new and exciting things are happening in our Sweat Factory CrossFit gyms.
As always, thank you to all of our listeners. We appreciate the support and truly enjoy the feedback we've been receiving from all of you.
Please reach out through our DMs on Instagram. If you aren't already following us, please do so at Failure is Progress, all lowercase. And now, on to today's episode.
Welcome back to another episode of Failure is Progress, presented by Sweat Factory CrossFit. Episode 038 is now in session. Keith, what's up, my bro?
What's up, big guy?
Hanging in there, man. Hanging in there. Nice to see you again.
It's good. It's good.
A couple of quick announcements we'll go into. The Friendsgivings will be November 16th, right?
Yeah.
November 16th at the Claremont location, 9 a.m.?
8:30.
8:30 a.m. for that location. Groveland will be on the 23rd at 8 a.m. And Afterburn will have two sessions, one at 7 and one at 9, also on the 23rd. So bring some grub. I've been telling everybody in class, if you have someone in class that's always beating you on the leaderboard and you really want to try to give it to them, bring us some cake or bring us some cheesecake or some little goodie and just fatten them up. Say, here you go, happy Friendsgiving, eat this, and then we'll come throw down on Monday.
Exactly. Start getting them treats now so that,
I told Darren I was going to bring him a pie.
Yeah.
I'll bring him a whole pie.
It is going to be a kind of brunch event at the Claremont location on the 16th as well. Don't forget about that big announcement that we have. You're not going to want to miss it. We're excited about it. We hope you are as well. But it's potluck style, so bring your favorite dish.
A little something.
Yeah, a little something. Cook something up. Let's see who got the chef skills. We will talk bad about you if your food's gross. No, I'm just kidding.
Somebody's gonna show up with some Chick-fil-A chicken nuggets, man, for sure. Somebody's gonna do that.
Those hit.
Those hit
for sure. All right, brother. So I wanted to get into a series on CrossFit methodology.
Okay.
And what I wanted to start with was the What is CrossFit lecture. I think that one is so important. And then it's so dense that if you read it out of the L1 manual, it's kind of hard to digest. So I kind of wanted to dive into that and talk about it from our perspective and then deliver some of the methodology so the athletes start to understand what this thing that we are trying to accomplish actually is.
I like that, man. I like that a lot. Let's jump right into that. CrossFit.
All right. So
what is CrossFit?
What is CrossFit? Well, like we said on the last pod, most people would just say, CrossFit's this community thing that we do, and we throw barbells around and give high fives, and sometimes tear our hands open and bleed, and we cry about workouts, but we still do them. But CrossFit actually has its own definition.
Yeah, and just to give a little bit more context, we're talking about when you actually go to the level 1 seminar, which is the kind of the gateway into CrossFit coaching, CrossFit athleticism, CrossFit, even as the games athletes now, I think that they've made a huge deal about this where they really want CrossFit games athletes taking their level 1. This is what they kind of go through and their kind of opening statement about what CrossFit is.
Yeah, I think the games athletes are starting to realize how important having that background knowledge is. And a lot of games athletes are coaches,
Yeah.
So it's important for them to go get that level 1 so they actually are practicing what they preach, like in class.
Agreed. And so the opening statement at the lecture is, what is CrossFit? If you take your L1 or if you have taken your L1, then you'll know this. You'll walk in and on the whiteboard it says, what is CrossFit?
Yeah. So what is CrossFit?
Well, I mean, I'll say the exact answer I said on mine. To me, CrossFit is mental health that gets your body fit. That was what I actually said to Melissa, the flow master at mine. But the actual definition is,
Oh, you want me to say it?
yeah,
I was quizzing you. You the one taking your L through L3.
it's sitting right in front of me,
I
but
know,
I know it.
they don't know that. Yeah, no, I know you know it, but it's constantly varied, functional movement executed at high intensity.
Yeah, and the cool thing about this is the way that it is not just said, but it's also written this way, where constantly varied are two words, high intensity are two words, and functional movement are the last two words, and they're grouped in three ways that way.
Yeah. I think it just like breaks it down super simple to have it. It's 6 words. Anybody can memorize and recite that. It's not very difficult. I think the power comes behind the meaning of those 6 words, but just knowing the 6 words can bring a lot of purpose to your training, like we were talking about last episode. When someone asks you what is CrossFit, or they're intimidated about CrossFit, it's like, well, CrossFit's actually just constantly varied functional movements executed at high intensity. You know what I mean? It's not something big and scary. It's not like, oh, you have to hit a 300-pound deadlift. It's not you have to jump on a 30-inch box. You don't have to run a 4-4-40. You know what I mean? It's constantly varied functional movements executed at high intensity.
And if we're talking about our gyms in specific with the level method programming that we use, it doesn't mean that you're doing brown and black level workouts every single day. I love Adrian Conway says this a lot on his Instagram. Like, just because it says high intensity doesn't mean it means maximum intensity. Yeah. That's obviously not the purpose of the whole idea. So go ahead, man. Break it down a little bit more.
Foundational construct of the methodology. It's not a perfect system, and I think Greg Glassman would agree with that statement. He never intended for CrossFit to be the perfect system to get anyone to an elite level of fitness. This is a vehicle that you can use to build what we're going to go into next, a broader degree of fitness.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of piggyback on that, his vision for this wasn't to create ultra athletes, it was to create ultra humans.
Yeah.
Right? The longevity part of it, which I'm always talking about, is really what he was always after.
No. All right, so we are going to break that down. Like Frankie mentioned, it is those 6 words, and each couplet of those words is going to have a definition with some descriptors, and like I said, we're just going to dive into the methodology. So, constantly varied. I wanted to ask you what the difference between variance and random programming is.
Good question. Variance should be specific. I believe, and I'm cheating here, but I believe it does include variance of load and movement, time, and repetitions in terms of this, versus randomness, which is just choosing without actually having a purpose.
Absolutely, and this goes back to what you talk about all the time, and that is the intention. When people look at a program and they're like, oh, we did pull-ups yesterday, we can't do pull-ups today, you're just looking for the workout to be random. You're not looking for the variance in your program. If we're in a pulling cycle where we're trying to increase your capacity to be able to vertically pull, you're probably going to hit pull-ups twice in the same day. You may have 2 different versions of pull-up training. One day might be more intensity or loading, as you just mentioned. One day may be higher volume, maybe a higher intensity version of the movement. So let's say one day you had kipping pull-ups, and then the next day you had like a strength biased pull-up where you're doing like a weighted pull-up, but you're only doing 3 to 5 reps, so the volume's super low. That is still varying your training because you're doing different versions of pull-ups.
I like that.
I think that concept of variance, people assume that variance means it needs to be completely different all the time, and that's just not what variance is. Variance is those little changes that we make from day to day or week to week or even month to month, cycle to cycle, to make sure that we're still reaching towards the overall goal.
Well, yeah, and I've said this before. This is actually one of my favorite things, or probably the thing that got me hooked on CrossFit, was the constantly varied portion. I've said it to you and Jen multiple times. Like, my life is constantly varied, and that's just how I am, right? My whole entire life, going to the gym, doing sessions 3 months at a time, and then stopping because I got bored. It was because I didn't have that variance. I did have some randomness in my workouts,
Yeah.
but I didn't have that variance, right? And so for me, being able to come in, not have to think about what I'm going to do, and know that I'm going to get that variance from our programming, it, like I said, it hooked me, knowing that I could constantly learn and constantly grow and constantly adapt. And what I mean by saying that my life is that way, like, I've had a million different hobbies. I've had all kinds of things that I've been into. It's very difficult for me to, and this is my personality type, it's kind of difficult for me to stay stuck on one thing, right? What I like about CrossFit in specific is, within the small time that I have been in CrossFit, I've had stints where I've been addicted to gymnastics, where I've been addicted to weightlifting, where I've been addicted to, running, for example, or learning how to row properly. Like, I can get these small little incremental addictions to certain things, but at the end of the day, I'm still getting that, high intensity functional movement in every single workout we do.
Yeah. Yeah. Side tangent. I have been doing CrossFit for 11 years, going on 12. And yesterday was the first day I did a side swing into a crossover with the jump rope.
Side swing into a cross. So like the
Yeah, so
the
you
boxer skip side swings.
Both hands on one side, you side swing and then right into a crossover. So instead of side swinging and then going to an open position, or doing a single under and then crossing, going from a side swing straight to a cross. And that was a really big moment for me. Everybody was looking at me like I had two heads because I was jumping up and down because I finally got this skill. But that was a monumental moment for me, because I kind of exercised that variance. You know what I mean? I've been doing double unders for 10 years. It's only been like the last year that I've really been playing with other versions of jump rope.
Yeah.
So adding that extra variance can give you that sense of accomplishment that you may not get if you're doing dumbbell curls and leg press every day,
Agreed.
So what is the importance of variance in our training, or why does CrossFit put that as a staple of our training?
It's to avoid that, to put it in the simplest terms, to avoid that plateau phase that everyone goes through when they are doing different exercises, where you kind of get stuck, so to speak.
Yeah, maybe from a mental aspect. Yeah, it keeps you more engaged. It keeps you more involved. It gives you something else to look forward to. Like I said, I've been doing this 11 years, and I just got a new skill, so
Right.
that can like reinvigorate that excitement. From the methodology standpoint, the reason that we have that constant variance is to build a broad, general, and all-inclusive fitness, because you're only going to your performance is only going to match the margins of your experience. So the wider we can make those margins, the more experiences you have, the better you're going to be able to perform. Perform at what? We're not trying to be elite athletes. We're not trying to go to the Olympics in something specific. So what we're trying to perform in is, like you mentioned earlier, life. Life is varied. Life has broad, general, and all-inclusive margins. So we need a broad, general, and all-inclusive fitness. Chuck Carswell says that we want to expand the margins of your fitness so that you don't suck at life. I love that quote.
It's even better knowing that it comes from him.
Yeah. Chuck Carswell is the GOAT. I wish he would post more on Instagram so that I could learn more directly from him.
Right.
But there's tons of good coaches out there that we can learn from. But shout out to Chuck. But yeah, so we want to expand those margins of your fitness, of your capacity, so that you're not helping one of your friends move and you throw out your back, or even something as simple as just bending over too quickly to pick up a pencil or whatever the case is, and now you throw out your back. You didn't brace your core and set yourself and lower down slowly to grab that pencil, and now you're sitting in a chair, icing your back for 3 weeks.
Yeah, and I mean, those are great points. How many of us have been in those situations where we're helping somebody, and CrossFitters love doing that, right? CrossFitters love when someone's like, "Hey, I need help moving this." They're like, "I got you."
Yeah.
But it really is part of the biggest part of why we do what we do, right? It's having that adaptability and that ability. I've heard it said numerous times that if tomorrow there was a zombie apocalypse, who'd be the first group that would survive the best? Probably be CrossFitters.
Yeah.
Because they're able to do so much extra,
Yeah.
so to speak. They're able to dip their toes into so many different kinds of sports, different kinds of cardiovascular exercises, whatever it may be. There's a show on Netflix, side note. It's called, I think, The Physical 100. It's like a Korean show. I'm sure a lot of people have seen it.
Yeah.
And somebody was telling me the other day, like, yeah, I've seen it. Almost all the people that win are CrossFitters.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that makes sense. You put a CrossFitter up against a boxer. Boxer might be faster, might be quicker at some things,
Yeah.
but they're not going to be quicker and better at everything. Same thing, you put a basketball player. They might be able to jump better than you, but there's going to be other things where they're not going to be as good as you. And over, a course of different athletic movements or challenges, the person who's better suited to adapt themselves to those challenges is going to perform better.
Absolutely. And adaptation is kind of the key there, right? Like, we want to make sure that we expose ourselves to as much as possible, so that way we're prepared for the things that we know we're going to have to do, but also the things that we don't know we're going to have to do. Like, a less extreme example of your zombie apocalypse is, we've all seen that one person that has their hazards on in the middle of an intersection, and they're trying to steer and push the car at the same time, and nobody else is helping them.
Yeah.
You didn't know that was going to happen. That's not a normal part of your day. But you can throw you can throw your car in park, hop out, and help that guy or girl or whoever push their car across the street, and not have to worry about, oh, I might tear an ACL or blow out a hamstring trying to push this car out of the intersection.
I'm too smart for that. I would just tie them to the back of my truck and pull them along.
I mean, that's also another option.
But yeah, look, another real world scenario would be, and we've seen it happen, what happened with Katrina in Louisiana, what happened with Harvey in Texas, mass flooding, these huge natural disaster situations. And there are people that survive and there are people that don't. Yeah. Having to climb out and get on the roof of your house, whatever it may be, these things, they are extreme. But we do also live in Florida, and we saw what just happened a few weeks back, So being prepared for anything means being prepared for anything.
Yeah. Even the things that you may not know are going to happen, you are still prepared for, or at least you have a hedge against that adversity that you may deal with in those situations.
Correct.
So that is why we constantly vary our training, is just so that we can expose ourselves to as much different types of fitness as we can, so that we're prepared for whatever life throws at us, and like Chuck Carswell says, so that we don't suck at life.
So we don't suck at life. Don't suck. What's the next portion?
After that, we're going into functional movement, and I think this one may be one of the trickier parts of the phrase constantly varied functional movements executed at high intensity, because there's so much that goes into functional movement. First,
I remember this part of the lecture.
Pop quiz. This is not a part of CrossFit. This is, not basic, but physiology speak. What are the 6 functional movement patterns?
Is it that they have to be natural?
No, those are the descriptors of functional movement. So this isn't something you're going to find in your CrossFit manual. This is, like I said, this is sports and physiology education.
This is like the squat.
Yeah, there you go.
The hinge.
Hinge, yep.
The squat, the hinge, the is brace one of them?
Brace is not one. Bracing is very important, but it's not a movement pattern.
Squat, hinge. I think that's about all I've got, bro.
What about the upper body? What do you do with your arms?
I'm thinking of the upper body.
Oh.
I mean, I know that there's contraction, but I'm not specific enough with the terms.
I think you're thinking too scientific. Try to regress it a little bit. What are like the basic movement patterns that we all do?
Push,
Yep.
pull.
Pull. Yep.
Oh, okay. Push, pull, squat, hinge. There's 6 total.
Yeah. You got 2 more.
Geez, I want to say sleep. Nah, man. Feed me. Give me them.
I got you. So the last 2 are lunge and then gait or walking.
I was gonna say gait, but I didn't realize where that fit in. And
Yeah.
okay.
You're good, brother. No, it was just something fun, I guess, for me.
No, I mean that is good to know. I need to know those.
Yeah. So as far as physiology education goes, those are our 6 functional movement patterns. Those are 6 areas that every human being and most other mammals interact with their environment in those sort of ways. And it's really cool that the 6 foundational movements of CrossFit kind of fit those, minus the lunge and maybe the gait, but 4 of the 6 are covered within the 6 foundational movements of CrossFit. So that goes back to,
Isn't there 9 foundational movements?
there are 9 foundational. What did I say? 6?
6. Yeah, I
Okay.
was like, don't rob me.
No, you're good. You're good. we can get you all them gains.
Either that or you were quizzing me.
Yeah, that's what it was. No, what it was I was looking at my notes and I keep seeing 6 descriptors, and I think that number was just stuck in my head, or I just don't know as much as I lead everybody to think.
Yeah, it's 9.
It's 9, yeah.
It's deadlift, sumo deadlift, high pull, med ball clean.
Yep.
Then you have the strict press, push press, jerk.
Yeah. Sorry.
Right?
Yep.
Jerk?
Yep. You're
And
good.
then you have, I haven't looked at
It
these
technically
in a
is
while.
push jerk, but because jerk implies that there's a split. There's
Ah.
really no thing called a split jerk, but
And
that's
then the last one is the air squat, the overhead squat, and there's one in the middle. No?
yeah, there's one in the middle.
Why am I blanking at
But
this?
it's not the one that most people think it is.
It's not the one that most people think it is.
Yeah.
Air squat, overhead squat, and man, how am I blanking on this? It's been so long. Front squat.
Front squat. There you go. Bang. Most people say back squat.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because that's still a functional movement pattern, but that doesn't apply to some of the things that we're trying to do in CrossFit.
Yeah.
All right. What I did want to talk about as far as CrossFit methodology was the 6 descriptors and the definition of functional movement. So how we describe it, there's 6 different ways we describe it, and then there's one definitive definition that we use to determine what is functional and what isn't functional. We'll start with the 6 descriptors, though.
Is that where we go natural, universal, essential, safe, compound yet irreducible, that they're all quarter extremity movement patterns?
Yep, that's 6.
Yeah, I have a 7th one written on here, but I guess it's part of the quarter extremity, the ability to move large loads over long distances quickly.
Oh,
No,
that
that's
is the definition of functional movements. Are you always jumping ahead? No, I'm just kidding.
I'm going over my notes, man.
No, we're going to bang through these one at a time. So natural. What do we mean when we say that functional movements are natural?
It's something that your body does naturally without you really thinking about it. We always use the definition of looking at a baby's squat, right? And they have the absolute greatest squat ever. It's just something they do. It's not something they think about. It's not something that they necessarily intend. It just, your body's capable of doing it.
Yeah, it's how we interact with our environment, right? Like, if you were to sit on the toilet to, use the restroom, you're probably not going to just lean backwards and trust fall onto the toilet, right? Like you're going to...
I want to see somebody do that. That is such a good example.
You're going to push your hips back. You're going to bend your knees. You're going to squat down onto the toilet. If you were going to, in the shower when you drop the soap, you're going to go ahead and hit that deadlift and pick the soap up. These are just different ways.
All of these natural movements happen in the bathroom restroom area.
I know. I don't know why I was so stuck on the bathroom. All right, let's go to the kitchen. Whenever you're putting something in the cabinet, you're doing the overhead press.
What other part of the house can we use?
I spend 90% of my time in the bathroom and the kitchen. So are there other parts of the house? I don't know. I come in the front door, I go to the kitchen. That's just how I live my life. But yeah, natural just means that these are movements that we are going to use to interact with our environment.
Which could also be called gymnastics, right? Moving your body in time and space.
Absolutely. That's why gymnastics is before weightlifting on that theoretical hierarchy of athlete development that we always talk about, is because most of your gymnastics movements are going to be extremely functional.
Agreed. So then the next one will be universal motor recruitment patterns, right?
Yeah.
Dive into that.
Universal motor recruitment patterns. That is a fancy way of saying that these movements are a little bit more athlete specific, but can also be applied in your real life. So you're never going to need to overhead press over probably 40, 50 pounds, but we do hundreds of pounds regularly in the gym.
Right.
That's just gym stuff that we're going to use to apply it to our real life. So these are just athlete-specific movement patterns that are also found in real life, that we overload so that we can supercompensate and adapt, so that when we do use them out in the real world, again, like Chuck Carswell says, we don't suck at life.
Yeah, I maybe we don't do on a normal basis heavy loads like that, but I can tell you there was one specific instance where I was trying to put a rooftop tent, which is, I would say, the entire tent on its end is probably over 100 pounds.
Oof, okay.
And I leaned it up against my camper and tried to put it up on top, and I had to basically do a ground to overhead. So it was kind of like a deadlift all the way up till I got it to my shoulders, and then I did a push press to get it actually on top of there. And there ain't no way in hell I would have done that without having all the training. In fact, the last time we did it, I was so sore that I couldn't do it by myself because it was that heavy. But yeah, it came into play.
Yeah,
it came into play.
Absolutely. And having those skills can also allow you to apply that to your real life in a more effective manner. You know what I mean? Like you said, you started out with that deadlift. You probably did like a little hip drive, kind of like a clean action to get it up to the shoulders. And then
a lot more than that.
You hit that split jerk, PRs.
Some sound effects in there too.
Yeah.
All right, so we got natural.
You ain't working.
We got universal motor recruitment patterns. Next up would be essential.
Essential. This one I really like to dive into with people because people have different ideas of what essential is. What would you say is essential functional movement?
I would say essential functional movement is being able to get up off your couch, get up off your desk chair, get out of your vehicle. Like, that is a squat all day long, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the air squat itself is the most overall functional movement we have in our movement library, so to speak.
Yeah.
Not only that, it uses some of the larger muscles in our bodies. But that's what an essential movement to me would be.
Absolutely. Yeah. Essential, like I said, most people have their own definition of what essential movement is, which can make this conversation a little bit tricky. But when we talk about it in terms of CrossFit methodology, we're talking about essential to your life and how, again, going back to interacting with your environment, how you're interacting with your environment. These movements are essential to providing you function in your either daily life or in those one-off situations when you're trying to put a rooftop tent on top of your truck.
Right.
They are also very restorative. So essential movements are rehabilitating in their nature. If you lose the ability to squat to full depth, like you just said, Just start working on your air squat. Start working on squatting to full depth by trying to squat to full depth. You may do it hand assisted. You may do it with your heels raised. You may do it with a counterbalance. Many different ways to train that. But just by training that squat, you end up being able to squat. You don't need to do a whole bunch of other things to try to rehabilitate you to be able to do your squat. Yeah, you can work on your ankle mobility, you can work on your hip mobility, but nothing else you do is going to get you to squat full depth faster than you trying to squat to full depth.
Yeah, I'll tell you, man, as a coach, for me, few things are as fulfilling as an athlete who starts with us who cannot squat to full depth. And less than 3 months later, you're watching them and they're getting down there.
Yeah.
Like that to me is fulfilling because it's like, it's almost equivalent to like when you see somebody who wants to lose 10 pounds and they're seeing that scale move.
Yeah.
You know, it's such a huge gauge of I lost the word now. Progress. Right? I lost the word. That's the title of the podcast. But
that's okay.
It's such a huge gauge. Like, you know, you can't go against that.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm not getting better. Really? Squat.
Yeah.
Like, argue yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You're talking to me in a squat right now. What are you talking about?
Right. For a lot of people, it's, oh, well, you know, the other one would be a pull-up. But to me personally, being able to do a pull-up isn't as essential to human life as being able to squat as low as you possibly can.
Yeah. I mean, that goes back to variance and expanding our margins. So I 100% agree with you with pull-ups not being as essential as being able to squat full depth, because you're going to interact with your environment way more in a squat, especially a full depth squat, than you are going to be able to pull your body weight up, you know, to get your chin or chest or even full bar muscle up style.
Right.
You know, if you're hanging off a cliff, then yeah, you might want to be able to do a bar muscle up, but the chances of you hanging off a cliff hopefully are slim. I don't know what kind of life y'all lead, but
unless you're Tom Cruise,
you know,
or Mike Jaworski.
Yeah.
All right. Next one would be safe.
And this one is
so important.
Controversial.
What?
Yeah. Well, the idea to the mainstream is that CrossFit isn't safe.
Understood.
You know, you're going to get hurt. You're going to blow out your knees. You're going to blow out your shoulders. You're going to have bad hips. If you do CrossFit, you're going to get injured. That's kind of like the mainstream viewpoint of CrossFit. So it's interesting that safe is in one of our descriptors of the movements that we choose.
Yep.
So it just like essential, it goes back to perspective, right? Like safe compared to what? You know, safe.
Yeah, and you know what? Bringing that up, I think is this is huge, right? So one of the things that keeps people out of a CrossFit gym the most is the idea that it is not safe.
Yep.
And this is one of the things that I think is most important about attending a CrossFit One lecture.
Yeah.
And about understanding the CrossFit methodology that I think is important to athletes. If you really do care about CrossFit, if this is something that is not just a workout regimen for you, but it's a part of your life and you haven't taken an L1, this is really the part that is most important to me from the entire thing, because I came out of the L1 thinking to myself, this is the key. Like I can make every single person I know a better human being if they understood all of this.
Yeah.
Right? Versus, you know, you're always going to have somebody in class who's going to be like, why do we have to do overhead squats?
Yeah.
It's the dumbest. I'm never going to need that. And then you realize what it sets you up for as a human being. You're like, you got to learn how to do it. You got to learn how to do it. You got to do it safely. And if you do that, you're just going to be X times better, right? Without them having gone through this, it's very difficult for them to see that, because to them, it's just a stupid movement that we do and it sucks, right? Which is what everybody says about every movement they can't do.
And it makes my shoulder hurt, and now my knees feel weird.
But it is. I mean, it's the safety part of this is absolutely huge.
Yeah.
So,
and it's one of the ways that we pick our movements. We pick our movements because they are safe. But like I mentioned before, it's about perspective, right? Like safe compared to what? These movements are going to be safe compared to not training these movements. Why? It goes back to expanding the margins of your experience, right? Like the more you expose yourself to, the better you're going to be prepared to handle something that you're not ready for. If you can snatch 225 and one day you have to get into a squat and press at the same time, you're probably not worried about getting hurt. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like for whatever reason you would have to do that movement. I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's somebody that, either a mechanic or something that's working on a car. He has to get under it into the, it's on the lift. He has to get under it in a squat and press something heavy over his head to mount it to the car or whatever. You know what I mean?
You never know when Spider-Man's going to get stuck under a building.
Exactly.
He's got to call his name out to himself while he looks at his reflection on the water and push that building.
Yeah. You never know when you turn into Spider-Man, because that's what CrossFit does for you. You become a Marvel superhero.
I'm one. Can't convince me otherwise.
But yeah, so training these movements is going to be way safer than not training these movements, because it builds a hedge of capacity or strength for you to interact with your environment without injury.
Now, when you speak about these movements that we're selecting, right, it doesn't mean every movement that we do in all of our workouts, correct? You're talking specifically about the 9.
I'm talking about any movement that CrossFit adopts as one of their staples. Like there's movements outside the 9 foundational movements that are staples of CrossFit, i.e. kettlebells. There's no kettlebells in the L1 manual. There's no kettlebells in the L2 manual, but it is a very strong staple of CrossFit.
I'm going to throw a controversial movement at you.
Okay.
The thruster.
The thruster.
Is that a necessary movement, and where's the safety part of that one?
I think we need to define our terms. Is it necessary? Can you name another way to build hip and shoulder power and stability at the same time?
At the same time, wall balls.
Power, maybe from the hips, but if you're pressing that much with your shoulders, it's either a strategy thing or you're just not good at the wall ball technique.
Isn't a wall ball basically like a precursor to the thruster?
Precursor in terms of capacity or strength?
Both. Although I feel like wall balls crush me way more.
It depends on how
I
you're
bring this up
progressively
specifically.
overloading it.
I bring it up specifically because it's one of those movements that causes me physical pain so much. So, that's why, and I'm sure a lot of people listening are like, yeah, Frankie, F those thrusters.
Oh, I hate thrusters too.
Yeah, everybody does. Everybody does.
But my question to you would be, why does it cause you pain? Well, first, let's start with what pain does it cause you?
It's the wrist pain. I can't hold that barbell comfortably without being in miserable pain in my wrists. Anytime I've ever done thrusters, it's like days later, my wrists are still in a lot of pain, which has gotten better over time.
I know. I saw
and
that.
I'm sure
285 front squat.
I'm sure that if I did thrusters more often, I could probably adapt to it more. But at the same time, because of the pain it causes me, I don't practice them more often. I can't say the same for an overhead squat or a snatch. I don't mind overhead squatting and snatching. They do cause me pain in my wrists, but it's not the kind of beatdown that I feel from a thruster. I don't know why. Can't explain it.
The systemic fatigue from a thruster added on with just the localized fatigue, it just makes it one of those powerhouse movements that's really good for you and also freaking sucks.
Well, I can't describe it, but you can.
However,
thank you for being here.
The pain that you're experiencing in your wrist, is that something that you only, well, no, you just said that you feel it in overhead squats and snatches as well. Mm-hmm. But the movement is a lot more fun to train because, forget thrusters.
For me, again, and that's the thing, I feel like I could do snatches at a lighter weight, still train the movement. There's a lot of functionality to it. You're doing your triple extension, you're expressing a lot of power to get that weight overhead, a lot of balance, coordination, agility involved in all that, right? With the thruster, on top of the mental aspect of it, you know, it is very painful. I cannot get the barbell onto my shoulders in order to do a thruster. Anyone who does a proper thruster has the barbell on their shoulders, and as they stand up, that velocity upwards allows them to thrust the bar off their shoulder and kind of just guide it with their hands to lock it out at the top.
Yeah.
I can't do that. I just basically stand up as quickly as I can and then push press as quickly as I can.
Yeah. So to kind of summarize this, the issue that you're experiencing has very little to do with the thruster and a lot more to do with the mobility.
The mobility.
The kind of sweet sour part of that is one of the, like we just talked about, essential movements are rehabilitating. The essential movements of the thruster are the front squat as well as the push press. Does your front squat front rack position look like your thruster front rack position? Are you holding the bar the same way? Is your elbows at the same height? Is your T-spine in the same position? Are your hips in the same position when you squat?
Almost, except I don't have my hands wrapped completely around the bar.
So now we're getting to the root cause of that problem.
Right.
We're training movements and then doing the same movement pattern in a different way.
Right.
Going back to universal motor recruitment patterns, all of these movements, or most of these movements, I should say, not all of them, but most of these movements are linked in a very specific way. So if you struggle with air squats, you're going to struggle with all of your squats because the air squat is the foundation of our squat.
Right.
If you struggle with front squats, you're going to struggle with your cleans, your thrusters, anything else that we would do in a front squatting position, clusters and bear complexes, all of that fun stuff you're going to struggle with. If you struggle with overhead squats, you're going to struggle with your snatches, your snatch balances.
Jerks.
Even your jerks to a point. Hopefully you're not jerking that wide, but it can still give us an idea of how your jerk does look.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that would be my advice to you is like, don't go from 0 to 100. And that's one of the things that we talk about when we talk about safety in the L1 is that these movements are safe as long as they are trained properly and they are progressed properly, right? Like, yeah, if day one your deadlift looks like crap and we ask you to max out, of course you're going to get hurt. I hope anybody listening to this already knows that.
Right.
But as long as you dial in your technique, I mean, the charter of CrossFit is mechanics, consistency, then and only then intensity, right? Like, we want you to move well. We want you to have one rep as perfect as possible. And then we want consistency. We want you to do 10 reps at 85 to 95% of perfect. We realize that you moving with multiple reps, you're not going to be 100% perfect, but you should be able to do that one rep perfectly and then do 10 reps at 85 to 90% perfect, and then add intensity because your movement's going to break down even more. So you're going to do 10 reps as fast as you can, and hopefully you can still maintain about 75 to 80% of your technique because that is going to keep you safe and give you the results of intensity.
Got it. That was really well said. You must know something.
I know a little bit.
You must know something, man. All right, next one. Compound yet irreducible.
This is simply said, there's no way to break down any of the movements that we choose as CrossFitters into its separate parts and train them as separate parts and then put them together for the full movement and your results be better. So for instance, if you want a 400-pound back squats, you're not going to hamstring curl and leg press your way to a 400-pound back squat. If you want a 400-pound back squat, you got a back squat, period.
Makes sense. Makes perfect sense.
So compound, meaning multiple joints moving at the same time, yet we cannot reduce those into isolated joint movements and then come back to compound and be better. We have to train compound if we want to work in compound.
So I can't just do a bunch of bicep curls and then a bunch of lat pull downs and then go out and get better at my pull-ups.
Bicep curls, no. Lat pull downs to a certain extent. Like you mentioned earlier, there is going to be a certain plateau where you're no longer like gaining a ton of strength. You still gain strength marginally, but then it just becomes a hypertrophic movement where you're just getting massive lats. But those lats aren't actually functional. They're just really, really big.
Like Arnold.
Like Arnold, yeah.
Awesome. I love it. Next one, core to extremity movement patterns. I love this, but I really want you to break down the whole force volume volume.
Volume or the power equation?
Yeah, the force velocity. Sorry, force velocity. I want you to break that part down because I don't remember this part too well.
Okay. So let's get into what core to extremity means first. So all of these movements are going to start with either rotation or anti-rotation of the trunk, and then they're going to create kind of a wave of contractions that goes all the way out through the limbs and then all the way out to your digits or your feet or your hands. Your feet or your hands.
I was waiting for a third one to come out.
I know. I was on a roll. Like I was gonna say a third one, and I was like, I don't think there is. Your ears.
Ears.
But yeah. So those wave of contractions are at different bases of force and velocity. So the more force you have, the closer you're going to be to the center of your body, because that's where all of our force transfers through. If you don't have a rigid core, it's going to be harder for you to produce force through that core and that force to be transferred into whatever you're trying to do. For instance, if you're doing a air squat and you're just loosey-goosey with your spine, you're going to push with your quads and just your hips are going to go up. Your chest would still be down by your knees. So when we add the rigidity to your core, you push with your legs, that transfers through your core because it's already braced. There's already action happening there. And then you continue to stand up nice and tall. If you reverse that and you try to go with the velocity muscles first or your faster muscles first, you can move your fingers way faster than you can move your entire shoulder. So that's when I think in the L1 it's referred to your offhand throw, because your offhand throw has terrible coordination usually. So you end up finishing the movement with your fingers and your hand first before the larger force muscles get done. So you end up having that goofy throw and it like kind of lobs and falls a foot in front of you.
That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. So core to extremity movement patterns. I always tell people, especially when we're doing our foundations, it is crucial to learn bracing, especially in our first session where we learn the deadlift and we learn the hinge, the importance of bracing and how important it is to have your core be strong. And then I explain how that core to extremity movement is prevalent in any sport, whether it be football, baseball. If you watch a pitcher, right, they got to brace their core before they're ready to throw that ball. If you watch a batter, same deal. They got to brace that core before they swing. That power comes from the hip. Same thing with a boxer, right? They got to brace that core if they're going to punch. And in a lot of cases, they practice that breathing, especially when you're first getting started. Yeah. They teach you to really brace. But I mean, it's in any and every sport. I mean, if you're not bracing, that power, that force, that velocity is impossible. You're just, like you said, loosey-goosey.
Yeah. Well, the real travesty is that you're not able to produce as much force, and force is gains. So if you're losing gains, just get out of my gym. Don't even show up. No, I'm kidding, obviously.
Don't suck.
But in all seriousness, that learning how to manipulate your trunk is going to allow you to produce more force. That force is going to increase your intensity, so you're going to get results faster. You're also going to save yourself from potential injuries, because not having a solid trunk is going to cause you to compensate with your stronger side, and compensation breeds injuries. Most people think that it's technique. I hurt my back, I did deadlifts wrong. You probably weren't either you weren't bracing well, or excuse me, or you were using a weight that didn't allow you to sustain your brace over the amount of volume that you did. If you're doing 10 sets of one at 95%, by the time you get to that third set, your core, no matter how hard you try to brace it, just might be smoked.
Right.
And now you're compensating by, rounding out your T-spine, or your hips are coming through too fast and you're overusing your lower erectors and all that fun stuff.
That makes perfect sense, man. Perfect sense. And then to sum it up, our ability to move large loads over long distances quickly
And
is
that is our definitive proof that, say again?
is it like our goal?
That is our metric for whether or not we want to adopt this into our CrossFit methodology. Like, does this implement or movement allow us to move large loads, long distances quickly? And what that does is a lot of things. One, it allows us to produce tremendous amounts of power. The more power we can produce, the higher our intensity. The higher our intensity, the better our results get. The second thing that it allows us to do, and I think this is maybe more important than power, and I know either Glassman or Nicole Carroll is going to find me and revoke my L3 after I say this, but I think more important than producing power or increasing our intensity, it allows us to have very specific data points. Large loads, those are usually weights.
Right.
Even if it's a body weight movement, your body has weight. You are moving a load. Long distances, we can calculate how far that distance is. Even if you're doing a vertical movement like an air squat or a pull-up, we can calculate how far that distance is. Quickly, we can time it. We can have a stopwatch with an AMRAP or a for time style of workout and see how long it took you to do those reps. All of that data allows us to calculate your power and measure your intensity. Without that data, we don't know how powerful you are or how intense you are.
Right.
Knowing how powerful you are or how intense you are does two things. One, it can show us the intensity or the power over the span of your life, like you alluded to earlier. That is what our longevity is going to be, is how long can we sustain our power and our intensity metrics. Mm-hmm. If we don't have that data, we have no idea if this system actually works. Does the methodology actually work? And because we have built so much data over the last 22 years, we can definitively say, yes, CrossFit does work. Here's the evidence of the hundreds of thousands of people that are doing this, and they're increasing their work capacity across broad time, motor domains over the course of their life.
And all of this sounds super technical, and we could even say science-y. But for those of you listening, to simplify all of this for you, I will tell you how I adapted this to my experience when I was an athlete before I was coaching, and I went up to you and I was like, Keith, I don't really know that I'm getting any better. I feel like I'm enjoying this and all, but I don't know that I'm necessarily stronger. And you said, pull out the app and let's take a look at your metrics. And over every single one of those metrics, I was better than when I started. And so that's where that proof is, right? And that's why the app simplifies things for us. That's why we use level method and all. But, just so that everyone comprehends or understands this as simply as possible, you can't say this doesn't work, or you can't say that it's not giving you the return on investment that you're looking for, when you can look at the app and actually see, like, hey, I leveled up here, I leveled up here, I leveled up here. I think it's very cool how they simplified it. But I do the same thing with my athletes. I love when they tell me, oh, I'm not getting any better. I'm like, listen, can't be doing brown level workouts every day and knock out reds on your assessments and then say you're not getting better. You know, the proof is there. Whether you enjoy it or not is a different story. Yeah. But there's no argument to be had here.
Yeah. The proof is in the pudding. It might be blackberry pudding, so going down a little strong, but I don't know. I've never had blackberry pudding. Is that a thing?
I don't even know, but I'm going to let you go on your own.
Sounds gross, so
not partaking in that.
Stuck in my head.
If you guys see blackberry pudding at the potluck, you know who brought it.
Yeah.
All right, man. What else are you getting into?
All right. Last one is high intensity and This is the one that kind of everybody gets stuck on. If I had any advice for this podcast, or one takeaway from this particular podcast episode, it would be to focus on those first two way more than you focus on what I'm about to say now. Because what I'm about to say now, you are already doing. I can't stress that enough. When you show up to class and you give 100% of your effort, you are already doing this next part. You may not know you're doing it, but it is already happening. So focus on the other two parts that we talked about, and then you can revisit this once you feel like you got a good hold on that. But that being said, the fun part, the sexy part, the part that everybody shows up for is high intensity. Burr, 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 burr. So real quick,
Maximum effort.
when it comes to CrossFit, what is the phrase that we use to refer to intensity, or how do we describe intensity?
The phrase or the equation?
Now the equation.
Power.
There's a specific, yes, intensity is power.
Intensity is average power.
But intensity is the independent variable most commonly associated with the rate of return on favorable adaptation. You don't have to memorize that like I did before my L3.
Oh, no, I do.
Well, you specifically. Sorry, I was trying to get into
working
the
on
minds
memorizing
of
that one.
of the readers. But basically, all that means is intensity gets results. It is the one thing that we know from evidence-based science that absolutely can give you whatever you're looking for. If you're trying to get stronger, intensity will get you there. If you're trying to get leaner, intensity can get you there. If you're trying to build muscle, intensity can get you there. If you're trying to get faster, intensity can get you there. If you're trying to run longer, intensity will get you there. The point here is that you do have the data to break down how intense your workouts actually are, because your intensity is exactly equal to your power, and your power is exactly equal to your intensity. And intensity does get you the results, but we want to make sure that we are training effectively so that we are getting the results that we want. If you are not adhering to the charter of CrossFit, which is mechanics, consistency, and then intensity, and just going straight for intensity, that is what can sometimes breed that injury that we spoke about earlier.
But most people do go just for the intensity, right?
Yep. And that's why I said, like, I really want you guys to dive into, and if you're going to re-listen to this podcast, really focus on that first two sections that we talked about, the constantly varied and the functional movements. Those are going to serve you way more than diving into high intensity, because you're already doing the high intensity. You do not need, in my opinion, to study the high intensity portion. Just having scores for your workout is letting you know how much power you are delivering. If I did Fran in 5.5 minutes one day, and then 6 months later I did it in 4 minutes, I know I have increased my power output.
That is the simplest and most efficient way to see your results without having to get into pulling out calculators and multiplying your force times your distance and dividing it by whatever time. It was like what we said, using your app, chalking your scores,
Yeah.
right? And then keeping that data over long periods of time.
One of the things I did want to go over is just some of the criticisms of having varied training. I think one of the biggest criticisms is that, hey, coach, I've been doing this CrossFit thing for about 2.5 months, and I'm not getting stronger, or I'm not getting faster, or I don't have my pull-ups yet. Two things about that. One, the goal of CrossFit is for you to build a broad fitness. You cannot build a broad fitness quickly. It is going to take time. You have to have patience. If you want a specific fitness, then you need to train that specific fitness. Or excuse me, let me take that back. If you want a specific fitness and you want that fitness quickly, then you need to train that specific fitness. If you are okay with that specific fitness taking time, then continue doing your CrossFit training and you will get there. Just be patient. But if you want specific adaptation quickly, you need the frequency of doing said adaptation often enough for you to get the results of your specific training. What that means is if you want pull-ups and you want pull-ups by the end of the year, this year, you need to train more pull-ups. If you want pull-ups and you're okay with getting them in the next 5 years, keep doing CrossFit. You're doing fine. You're doing great. Keep showing up, being consistent, focusing on your sleep and your diet, and you will get your pull-ups. I can guarantee you that.
100%. That's how I got mine.
Yes, sir.
Not by all that, just by listening to you.
Just absorb it.
Just listening to my coach. And the same goes for everyone listening. Just listen to your damn coach.
Facts.
You'd be surprised what could happen if you do.
It's like we do this for a living or something. That's crazy.
I mean, I'm not a real coach. I just play one on TV. All right, man. What else you got?
That's it for today. I think this was pretty good. I think we're going to keep the trend going with the methodology and the specific lectures of the L1. And then once we finish that, maybe diving into some other areas of the L1 that they don't quite hit during the lectures. But I think this was good.
Agreed, man. I love this. I think it's really fun. I've been to 2 CrossFit lectures, and I'll never get over it. It's just eye-opening every single time.
No.
And I do still watch the recaps that I have on my CrossFit account, and it's just every single time you learn something new, or you get a different perspective of the same content, and you're like, man, that's what that was, you know? So yeah, if you have not taken one and you have been curious about taking L1, take an L1. Don't think about it. There's a few coming up soon nearby, Fort Myers, St. Augustine. There's a lot of them to go down in Tampa. That's where I took mine. So just look one up on the CrossFit website and check it out. And also keep showing up, keep being consistent. And like we just said, listen to your coaches.
Absolutely. Don't forget to like, share, comment, follow us on Instagram at Failure is Progress. All those things help us reach more people just like you so that we can continue to build the the Failure is Progress community. But if you're at Sweat Factory, definitely give us a listen. And we would really appreciate that.
Awesome, man. All right, that's going to wrap this one up. We'll catch you on the next one. Take care.
Take care.